I never thought a stupid piece of asphalt would ruin my life. But that's exactly what happened when the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association decided my driveway was community property. My name is Carson Walsh, and I've lived in this upper-middle-class neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado for 5 years. I'm a software engineer who works from home, which means I value my peace and quiet more than most people. When I bought the house on Ridgeview Drive, I specifically chose it because of the long, gated driveway that wound up a slight hill to my property. The gate was already installed when I purchased the place, a beautiful wrought iron fixture that gave me complete privacy from the street below. The previous owners had it custom made, and it was one of the selling points that made me fall in love with the property. Everything was fine until Patricia Henderson became the new HOA president last March. Patricia was exactly what you'd imagine when someone says, HOA Karen, with her blonde highlighted hair always styled in that speak to the manager cut, her collection of pastel cardigans, and her perpetually pursed lips that seemed designed specifically for disapproval. She was 47 years old and had apparently decided that micromanaging the neighborhood was her life's true calling. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in early November. I was sitting at my desk, debugging some code for a client when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I pulled up the security camera feed on my phone. Patricia stood there with another woman I didn't recognize, both clutching clipboards like they were shields. I considered ignoring them, but my truck was parked in the driveway, so they knew I was home. Sighing, I saved my work and headed downstairs. Carson, Patricia said the moment I opened the door, not bothering with pleasantries. We need to discuss your driveway situation. My driveway situation, I repeated, confused. What situation? May we come in? The other woman asked. She was younger than Patricia, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. I'm Jennifer Morse, the HOA's new legal consultant. Legal consultant. That couldn't be good, but I stepped aside and let them into my living room. They both remained standing, even when I gestured to the couch. Mr. Walsh, Jennifer began, flipping through papers on her clipboard. We've been reviewing the original neighborhood planning documents from when Meadowbrook Hills was developed in 1998. There's an issue with your property that needs immediate attention. What issue? I asked, keeping my voice level. Patricia jumped in, clearly unable to contain herself. Your driveway is actually classified as a private access road, which means it falls under different regulations than a standard residential driveway. According to the original development agreement, all private access roads within the community are meant to provide secondary emergency access to surrounding properties. I stared at her. That's ridiculous. My driveway goes from the street to my house. It doesn't connect to anything else. Not currently, Jennifer said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. But according to these documents, your driveway was intended to eventually connect to a planned secondary road that would loop around the eastern section of the neighborhood. That road was never built due to budget constraints, but the classification of your driveway never changed. Okay, I said slowly. So what does that mean for me? It means, Patricia said with barely concealed satisfaction, that your gate is in violation of community access regulations. Emergency vehicles need to be able to use that driveway as an alternate route if necessary. Emergency vehicles, I laughed. It's a 100-foot driveway that leads only to my house. There's no through access. It's literally impossible for it to be used as an alternate route to anywhere. Jennifer pulled out another sheet. Nevertheless, the classification stands. We're going to need you to remove the gate or keep it permanently unlocked. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. You're joking. We're quite serious, Patricia said. The HOA board voted last night. The gate needs to be unlocked within 2 weeks, or you'll face daily fines of $200. This is insane, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. That gate has been there for at least 15 years. The previous owners had it installed. No one's ever had a problem with it. The previous owners weren't in compliance either, Jennifer said primly. We're simply correcting an oversight that's been allowed to continue for too long. The HOA has a responsibility to enforce community regulations. Show me the exact regulation, I demanded. Jennifer flipped to another page and held it up, but she didn't hand it to me. I could see it was a photocopy of an old document, the text barely legible. Section 7.3 of the original development agreement. All designated emergency access routes must remain unobstructed at all times. But my driveway isn't an emergency access route, I protested. It doesn't go anywhere. The designation is what matters legally, Patricia said, not the current physical reality. Now you have 2 weeks. We'll be checking. They left before I could argue further. I stood in my living room, furious and baffled, trying to process what had just happened. This couldn't be legal. It made no sense. I spent the rest of that day researching HOA law in Colorado. What I found wasn't encouraging. HOAs had shocking amounts of power, especially when it came to enforcing deed restrictions and covenants. But this situation seemed different. They were claiming my driveway was public access based on a decades-old planning document for a road that was never built. I decided to call a lawyer. I found a real estate attorney named Marcus Chen who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Boulder, and he agreed to see me the next morning. Marcus was in his early 50s, with graying hair and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I explained the situation while he took notes. "Let me see if I understand," he said when I finished. "The HOA is claiming your driveway is an emergency access route based on a 1998 development plan that was never fully implemented." "That's exactly it," I confirmed. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "That's unusual. Typically, if a planned road or access route isn't built within a reasonable time frame, the designation becomes void. But HOA law can be tricky. I'll need to see all the documents, the original deed, your title insurance policy, and these planning documents they're referencing." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked. "My retainer is $5,000, he said. "But I'll be honest with you, Carson. Fighting an HOA can be expensive and time-consuming. Sometimes it's cheaper to just comply, even if you're right." "I'm not removing my gate," I said firmly. "This is principle now. They can't just declare that my private property is public access." Marcus nodded. "I respect that. Give me a few days to review everything. Don't do anything drastic yet." I left his office feeling slightly better, but the 2-week deadline was looming. I had 12 days left. Over the next week, Patricia made her presence known. She drove past my house at least twice a day, always slowing down to stare at the gate. Sometimes she'd park on the street and take pictures with her phone. It was unnerving and clearly intended to intimidate me. Marcus called me 8 days before the deadline. "I've got good news and bad news," he said. "The good news is that you're probably right. That planning document shouldn't apply to your driveway anymore because the larger project was abandoned. The bad news is that proving it will require going through the HOA's dispute resolution process, which could take months, and in the meantime, they can still fine you." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You have a few options," he said. 1. Comply and remove the gate while we fight this. 2. Pay the fines and fight it. 3. We file for an injunction to stop the fines while the dispute is resolved. but that's not guaranteed to work and will cost more money up front. How much in total are we talking? I asked. If this goes all the way, probably $20,000 to $30,000 in legal fees, he said. Maybe more if they really dig in. I felt sick. For a gate on my own property. Welcome to HOA law, Marcus said sympathetically. Look, I'll draft a letter to send to the HOA explaining our position. That might be enough to make them back down. Some HOAs are just testing boundaries. When they realize you have legal representation, they fold. And if they don't, I asked. Then we go to war, he said simply. Marcus sent the letter the next day. I got a response 48 hours later, not from Patricia but from Jennifer Morse. The letter was brief and cold. The HOA stood by its position. The fines would begin as scheduled, and they looked forward to resolving this matter according to proper procedures. I called Marcus immediately. They're not backing down. I see that, he said. Okay, here's what we'll do. Let them start the fines. Don't pay them. We'll fight this through the formal dispute process. Keep detailed records of everything. And I just leave the gate locked, I asked. That's your decision, he said. But yes, I'd recommend not complying until we've exhausted other options. The deadline came and went. The morning after, I found a certified letter in my mailbox, a formal notice that I was being fined $200 per day, starting immediately. The letter also informed me that if the fines reached $5,000, the HOA could file a lien against my property. $5,000 meant 25 days. Less than a month before this could affect my home ownership. I went about my business, trying to focus on work. But Patricia wasn't done. A week after the fine started, I came home from the grocery store to find her standing in my driveway. She'd somehow gotten through the gate, which I'd left open while I was out. This is private property, I said, getting out of my truck with my groceries. You need to leave. I'm conducting an inspection, Patricia said, making notes on her clipboard. The HOA has the right to inspect properties for violations. Not without notice and not without permission, I said. Get out of my driveway right now or I'm calling the police. I'll report this hostile behavior to the board, she said, but she walked back toward the street. I watched her go, my hands shaking with anger. I immediately called Marcus. She was on my property without permission. That's trespassing, he said. Did you tell her to leave? Yes, and she did, I said. But Marcus, this is harassment. I agree, he said. I'm going to send another letter. We can also file a restraining order if it continues. November turned to December. The fines accumulated. I didn't pay them on Marcus's advice. We filed a formal dispute with the HOA, requesting a hearing. They scheduled it for January 15th, over a month away. In the meantime, the fines kept coming. Patricia's harassment escalated. She started parking across the street from my house for hours at a time. She'd take pictures and make phone calls, loudly discussing the Walsh situation, where I could hear her if I was outside. Neighbors began avoiding me, though I wasn't sure what she'd told them. Then, in mid-December, the weather forecast started predicting something unusual. A massive cold front was developing over Canada, and meteorologists were warning it could bring the worst winter storm Colorado had seen in decades. We're talking potential blizzard conditions, the weatherman said on the evening news. Heavy snow, possibly 2 to 3 feet in the mountains and foothills. Boulder area could see 18 to 24 inches. High winds. This is going to be dangerous, folks. Stock up on supplies and prepare to stay home for several days. The storm was predicted to hit on December 22nd. People started panic buying at grocery stores. I made sure I had plenty of food, water, and firewood for my fireplace. My house was well insulated and I had a generator in case the power went out. I'd been through bad winters before. On December 20th, 2 days before the storm, Patricia showed up at my door again. This time she had 2 other people with her. A man in his 60s who I recognized as Robert Chen, another board member, and a younger guy in his 30s wearing a contractor's vest. "Carson," Patricia said when I opened the door, "we need to discuss the gate situation again. With the storm coming, it's a safety issue." "My gate has nothing to do with storm safety," I said. The contractor stepped forward. "I'm Dave Sullivan from Boulder Security Solutions. The HOA has contracted me to remove your gate if you continue to refuse compliance." "You're not touching my gate," I said. "The HOA has the authority." Robert spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. "This is an emergency situation. That driveway needs to be accessible." "Accessible for what?" I demanded. "It doesn't connect to anything." "Emergency vehicles," Patricia said. "We've been over this." "No emergency vehicle has ever needed to use my driveway," I said. "This is harassment over a property dispute, and you're using the storm as an excuse." "The fines are now at $6,400, Jennifer said, appearing from behind the group. I hadn't even seen her. "We've filed a lien against your property. If you don't pay and comply, we can force a sale." My stomach dropped. "You can't do that." "We can," she said coldly. "And we will. Now you can either unlock that gate and leave it unlocked, or we'll have it removed entirely. Your choice." I looked at Marcus's number on my phone. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday. He might not answer, but I called anyway. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Carson, the HOA is at my door threatening to remove my gate," I said quickly. "They have a contractor with them." "Put them on speaker," Marcus said. I did. "This is Marcus Chen, Mr. Walsh's attorney. Any attempt to remove or tamper with his gate will be considered destruction of private property. I will file charges and sue for damages." "The gate is on property designated for community access," Jennifer said. "We have the right." "You have a disputed claim," Marcus countered. "You don't have a court order. Touch that gate and I'll have the police here within minutes." There was a long silence. Finally, Patricia said, "Fine. But the fines continue. And when this storm hits, any problems caused by that locked gate will be your responsibility, Mr. Walsh." They left. I closed the door and took the phone off speaker. "Marcus, can they really force a sale of my house?" "Not easily," he said. "But yes, if the fines get high enough and remain unpaid, they can eventually foreclose. We won't let it get that far. The hearing is in January. We'll fight this." "That's almost a month away," I said. "The fines will be over $12,000 by then." "I know," Marcus said. "Look, I'll be honest. This HOA is unusually aggressive. Patricia Henderson seems to have a personal vendetta. That actually works in our favor because it shows this isn't about legitimate community concerns. Document everything. Record interactions if Colorado allows it, which it does with one-party consent. Build your case." After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring out the window at the gate. It was my gate on my property, protecting my privacy, and somehow I was the bad guy. The next day, December 21st, the storm preparations intensified. The sky was already gray and heavy. The temperature had dropped to the low 20s. Everyone in the neighborhood was battening down hatches. I saw Patricia making the rounds, knocking on doors. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could imagine. She was probably telling everyone that if anything went wrong during the storm, it would be my fault because of the locked gate. That evening, the snow started. Light flurries at first, but the forecast said it would intensify overnight. I made sure my generator was ready, brought in extra firewood, and filled my bathtub with water just in case the pipes froze. By morning on December 22nd, the world was white. Snow was falling so heavily I could barely see across my yard. The wind howled, creating massive drifts against the side of my house. I checked the news. The storm was living up to predictions. Boulder was being buried under what meteorologists were calling a once-in-a-generation blizzard. I settled in with coffee and my laptop, working while keeping an eye on the weather. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Walsh." A woman's voice, professional. "This is Deputy Martinez with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. We've received a complaint that your locked gate is preventing emergency access to your neighborhood." My heart rate spiked. "That's not true. My driveway only goes to my house. It doesn't provide access to anything else." "We have someone here claiming it's an emergency access route per the HOA regulations," the deputy said. "It's a property dispute," I said. "I have a lawyer. The HOA is lying. My driveway goes from the street to my house. It's physically impossible for it to provide emergency access to anywhere else." There was a pause. "Sir, can you describe the layout of your property?" I did in detail. "If you look at a map or satellite view, you'll see it's a 100-foot driveway up a hill. It dead ends at my garage. There's no through access." Another pause. "Hold on." I heard muffled conversation in the background, then she came back. "Mr. Walsh, I'm looking at a satellite map now. You're correct. Your driveway doesn't connect to anything. Who reported this as an emergency access route?" "Patricia Henderson, the HOA president," I said. "She's been harassing me for weeks over the gate. We have a legal dispute pending." "I see," the deputy said, her tone changing. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Walsh. We won't be bothering you further about this." She hung up. I sat there, stunned. Patricia had actually called the sheriff's department and lied to them about my property. That had to be illegal. I called Marcus, but it went to voicemail. Right, it was the day before Christmas Eve. He was probably with family. I left a message explaining what happened. The storm raged all day and into the night. By the evening of December 23rd, we had over 20 inches of snow and it was still falling. The power flickered a few times but stayed on. I was warm and comfortable, if a bit isolated. Then, on the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, things got interesting. I woke up to the sound of someone laying on a car horn. It was continuous, angry, insistent. I pulled on clothes and looked out my bedroom window. The snow had finally stopped, leaving everything buried under massive drifts. And at the bottom of my driveway on the street, someone was honking. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera for the gate. Patricia's white SUV was there, and she was standing next to it in the snow, gesturing frantically at my gate. Behind her were at least a dozen other cars, all trying to navigate the snow-covered street. My phone rang. "Another unknown number," I answered. "This is Carson Walsh." "Mr. Walsh, this is Patricia Henderson." Her voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "You need to open your gate immediately." "Why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because your driveway is the only route out of the eastern section of the neighborhood," she said. "The main road is completely blocked by snowdrifts. We need to use your driveway to access Ridgeview Drive from the other direction." I almost laughed. "Patricia, my driveway goes to my house. It doesn't go to the eastern section." "There's a service path," she insisted, "behind your property. It connects to the eastern loop. We need to use it." "There's no service path behind my property," I said. "There's woods." "There used to be a path," she said. "It might be overgrown, but it's there. This is an emergency. People need to get out. We have someone who needs to get to the hospital." That stopped me. "Who needs the hospital?" Mrs. Alina Pritchard, Patricia said. "She's having chest pains. The ambulance can't get in through the main entrance because of the drifts. We need another route out." I thought quickly. Call the ambulance. Have them come in from the north entrance, off Mountain View Road. That's only half a mile from the eastern section. That's blocked too, Patricia said. Everything's blocked. Your driveway is the only option. Patricia, even if I open the gate, my driveway doesn't go where you need it to go, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You're wrong about the service path. I'm not wrong, she snapped. I've seen the old maps. There's a path behind your house that connects to the eastern loop. It was part of the original development. That was never built, I said. Just like the road you claimed my driveway was supposed to connect to. None of that was built. You're going to let someone die because of your stubbornness. Patricia's voice rose to a screech. I'm not letting anyone die, I said. But opening my gate won't help because my property doesn't connect to where you think it does. Have you actually tried the north entrance? It's blocked, she repeated. By how much snow? I asked. Because I have a plow attachment for my truck. If the north entrance just needs plowing, I can help with that. There was silence. Then, we don't need your help. We need you to open the gate. I'm coming down there, I said. Don't leave. I hung up and got dressed in full winter gear. Insulated pants, heavy coat, boots, gloves, hat. Then I started my truck and let it warm up while I attached the plow blade I kept in my garage. It took 15 minutes in the freezing cold, but I got it secure. I drove down my driveway and stopped at the gate. Using the remote, I opened it and drove through, then closed it behind me. I wasn't leaving it open. The street was chaos. At least 20 cars were stuck or trying to navigate the deep snow. Patricia stood in front of her SUV, arms crossed. When she saw me, her face contorted with rage. You're plowing out, she demanded. But you won't unlock your gate. My gate won't help you, I said. But I'll plow the north entrance if that's really blocked. Where's Mrs. Pritchard? An elderly man approached, trudging through the snow. I'm Harold Pritchard. My wife is in our car. She's having chest pains and trouble breathing. Please, we need to get her out. Show me, I said. He led me to a sedan 3 cars back. An elderly woman was in the passenger seat, her face pale and drawn. She was conscious but clearly in distress. Has anyone called 911? I asked. They said the ambulance can't get in, Harold said. Too much snow on the main entrance. They're trying to coordinate with a snow plow, but it could be hours. I pulled out my phone and called 911 myself. This is Carson Walsh at Meadowbrook Hills Development in Boulder. We have a woman with chest pains who needs emergency medical attention. I have a truck with a plow. Tell me where the ambulance is and I'll clear a path. The dispatcher put me on hold, then came back. The ambulance is at the main entrance on Meadowbrook Drive. They can't get past the drifts blocking the entrance. Can you really clear it? I can try, I said. Give me 20 minutes. I hung up and turned to Harold. I'm going to plow the main entrance. Once I clear it, the ambulance can get in. Keep your wife warm and calm. Thank you, he said, tears in his eyes. I got back in my truck and started pushing through the snow toward the main entrance. Patricia tried to flag me down, but I ignored her. This wasn't about her anymore. The main entrance was about a quarter mile from where I'd been. When I got there, I saw the problem. Massive drifts, probably 4 to 5 feet high, had completely blocked the entrance. The wind had created a perfect barrier. I could see the ambulance's lights flashing on the other side. I started plowing. It was hard work and my truck struggled with the deepest parts, but I made progress. Push forward, back up, push forward again. Slowly, I carved a path through the drifts. It took 30 minutes, not 20, but I got through. The moment there was enough space, the ambulance came forward. I backed up my truck and waved them through. The ambulance made its way to the eastern section where the Pritchards waited. I followed at a distance, making sure they didn't get stuck. When they reached Mrs. Pritchard, the EMTs were quick and professional. Within 10 minutes, they had her on a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance. As the ambulance left, heading back out the path I'd plowed, Harold approached my truck. "Thank you," he said again. "You probably saved her life." "I hope she's okay," I said. "That was the right thing you did," another neighbor said, a middle-aged man I didn't recognize. "We all appreciate it." More neighbors gathered around, thanking me, but Patricia stood apart, glaring. When the crowd dispersed, she approached. "You still need to unlock your gate." "Why?" I asked, exhausted. "I just proved you can get in and out through the main entrance." "You had to plow it," she said. "What if there's another emergency and you're not here?" "Then someone else can plow," I said. "Or the county will. That's not my responsibility." "Everything's your responsibility when you refuse to follow HOA regulations," she said coldly. I drove back to my house, parked, and went inside. I was physically and emotionally drained, but at least Mrs. Pritchard was getting medical attention. Marcus called me that evening. "I got your messages. You've had quite a day." I filled him in on everything. The sheriff's call, Patricia's false claim about my driveway being an emergency route, the situation with Mrs. Pritchard, all of it. "Carson, she filed a false police report," Marcus said. "That's a crime. And then she tried to manipulate you during a medical emergency. This is beyond typical HOA overreach. This is harassment and potentially criminal behavior." "What do I do?" I asked. "First, file a police report about the false emergency claim," he said. "Second, document everything that happened today. Get statements from the Pritchards if possible. Third, we're going to push for an emergency hearing before January. This has escalated to a point where you need immediate relief." "Can we really get a hearing that fast?" I asked. "We can try," he said. "This is Christmas Eve, so nothing will happen until after the holidays. But first thing next week, I'm filing motions. Patricia Henderson has crossed lines that even HOAs aren't allowed to cross." Christmas was quiet. I spent it alone, which was fine. I'd always been more introverted anyway, but I couldn't stop thinking about the situation. My simple desire to keep my gate locked had spiraled into something insane. The day after Christmas, I drove to the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and filed a report about Patricia's false emergency claim. The deputy who took my statement was professional and thorough. "We do take false reports seriously," she said, "but I'll be honest, proving intent can be difficult. She could claim she genuinely believed your driveway provided emergency access. Even though a simple map check proves it doesn't," I asked. "Even then," she said, "but we'll investigate. If there's a pattern of behavior, that helps." I also reached out to Harold Pritchard. His wife was doing better. It had been angina, not a heart attack, and they'd gotten her medication adjusted. He was happy to provide a written statement about what happened. "I want to be clear," he wrote. "Carson Walsh responded immediately to help when my wife needed medical attention. He used his own equipment and time to clear snow so the ambulance could reach her. Patricia Henderson, on the other hand, seemed more concerned about the gate dispute than about my wife's health." Marcus filed the emergency motion on December 29th. We requested an immediate hearing to address the HOA's harassment and overreach, and to stop the fines pending a full resolution of the dispute. The hearing was scheduled for January 6th, which wasn't as fast as I'd hoped but was better than waiting until mid-January. In the meantime, Patricia wasn't done. On New Year's Eve, I got a letter from the HOA. They were assessing an additional fine of $500 for failure to maintain community relations, and another $1,000 for creating a safety hazard during an emergency situation. "They're making up fines now," I told Marcus when I called him. "That actually helps us," he said. "It shows they're retaliating. Keep every letter, every fine notice, everything." The hearing on January 6th was held at the county courthouse. It was a civil matter, so it wasn't a full trial, but both sides had to present their cases to a judge. Judge Rebecca Morrison was in her early 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Marcus and I sat at one table. Patricia, Jennifer Morse, and two other board members sat at another. Marcus presented our case methodically. He showed the satellite images proving my driveway didn't connect to any other properties. He presented the documents showing the planned road that was supposed to justify the emergency access designation was never built. He showed the timeline of harassment, the escalating fines, the false police report, everything. Then he brought up the Christmas Eve incident. Your Honor, while Mrs. Pritchard's medical emergency was ongoing, Miss Henderson was more concerned with forcing Mr. Walsh to open his gate than with actually helping the situation. Mr. Walsh, using his own equipment, cleared the actual blocked entrance and allowed the ambulance access. This demonstrates that the gate was never the issue. The issue is Miss Henderson's personal vendetta. Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. Miss Henderson, is it true that you filed a police report claiming Mr. Walsh's driveway was an emergency access route, when satellite imagery clearly shows it's a dead-end driveway? Patricia stood. Your Honor, according to the 1998 development agreement, I've read the development agreement, the judge interrupted. The planned road was never built. The access route doesn't exist. On what basis did you tell the sheriff's department that Mr. Walsh was blocking emergency access? I believed there was a service path, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. You believed or you knew? Judge Morrison asked. I had seen old maps, Patricia said. Had you physically verified this service path existed? The judge pressed. Patricia hesitated. No. But, so you filed a report based on assumption, not fact, Judge Morrison said. And when an actual emergency occurred, Mr. Walsh responded appropriately while you continued to focus on a property dispute. Is that accurate? The gate is still a violation, Patricia said, her voice rising. The HOA has the right to enforce regulations. The HOA has the right to enforce legitimate regulations, the judge corrected. What you've presented here is an attempt to enforce a regulation based on infrastructure that was never built. Mr. Walsh's driveway is exactly what it appears to be, a private driveway serving a single residence. There is no legal basis for claiming it must remain unlocked for emergency access. Jennifer Morse stood. Your Honor, the development agreement clearly states that emergency access routes must remain unobstructed, Judge Morrison said. But Mr. Walsh's driveway is not an emergency access route. It never was. The plan to make it one was abandoned decades ago. You're trying to enforce a provision that doesn't apply. She shuffled papers, then looked up. Here's my ruling. The HOA will immediately cease all fines against Mr. Walsh related to the gate. All existing fines are voided. Mr. Walsh is under no obligation to remove or unlock his gate. Furthermore, Miss Henderson, you are ordered to cease all contact with Mr. Walsh, except through official HOA channels, and only regarding legitimate community matters. If you continue this pattern of harassment, Mr. Walsh will have grounds for a restraining order and a civil suit. Patricia's face went red. This is, my ruling stands, Judge Morrison said firmly. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Walsh's legal fees incurred in defending against these baseless claims. Do you understand? There was silence from the HOA table. Finally, Jennifer said, Yes, Your Honor. Good, the judge said. Now, regarding the false police report, Miss Henderson, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review. Filing a false emergency report is a crime, and while I can't make that determination here, they will investigate. Patricia looked like she might faint. I didn't file a false report. I genuinely believed, that's for the DA to determine, Judge Morrison said. This hearing is concluded. We stood as the judge left. I felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Marcus was grinning. That went better than I expected, he said. She demolished their case. Patricia and her group left quickly, not looking at us. I noticed several neighbors who'd attended the hearing looking at me with new respect. Outside the courthouse, Harold Pritchard approached me. "Thank you again," he said. "And I'm glad you won. That whole situation was ridiculous." "How's your wife?" I asked. "Much better," he said. "She wanted me to tell you we're grateful for what you did." Over the next few days, I started getting apology visits from neighbors. Apparently, Patricia had been spreading rumors about me, claiming I was selfish and dangerous. Now that the truth was public, people were embarrassed. "We should have asked you directly," one neighbor said. "We just believed what Patricia told us." "It's fine," I said, though it stung a bit. "I get it." The HOA paid Marcus's legal fees, nearly $8,000. They also sent me a formal letter stating that all fines were voided and that I was in good standing with the community. But Patricia wasn't done, even if she should have been. In mid-January, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. They were investigating Patricia's false police report and wanted to interview me. I agreed immediately. The interview was straightforward. I provided all my documentation, the timeline of events, everything. The investigator, a woman named Detective Sarah Kowalski, listened carefully. "This is a clear case of filing a false report," she said when I finished. She called in an emergency claim that was demonstrably untrue. The question is whether we can prove she knew it was false when she made the report. "She'd been trying to force me to open the gate for weeks," I said. "She knew the layout of my property. She had to know my driveway didn't connect to the eastern section." "That's what we're trying to establish," Detective Kowalski said. "We're interviewing other board members and reviewing HOA documents. If they have maps or records showing the actual layout, and Patricia had access to those records, that proves knowledge." "What happens if you determine she filed a false report knowingly?" I asked. "It's a misdemeanor in Colorado," she said. "She could face fines and potentially jail time, though jail is unlikely for a first offense. More importantly, it would be on her record." The investigation took several weeks. During that time, there was an emergency HOA meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that there was a vote of no confidence in Patricia's leadership. She was removed as president by a vote of 47-12. Robert Chen became the new president. His first act was to send me a personal apology letter. "Dear Mr. Walsh," it read, "on behalf of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, I want to formally apologize for the treatment you received regarding your property. The actions taken by the previous board leadership were inappropriate and not representative of our community values. We have reviewed all documentation and agree with the judge's ruling. Your driveway is private property and you have every right to maintain your gate. We hope to rebuild trust with you and all our residents moving forward." It was a nice gesture. I appreciated it. In late February, Detective Kowalski called me. "We're moving forward with charges against Patricia Henderson," she said. "We found HOA records that prove she had access to accurate property maps showing your driveway was a dead end. She made the false report knowing it was false." "What happens now?" I asked. "She'll be formally charged and arraigned," Detective Kowalski said. "Given that it's a first offense and no one was physically harmed, she'll probably accept a plea deal, but she'll have a criminal record." Patricia was charged on March 2nd. The local news picked up the story. Former HOA president charged with filing false police report in gate dispute. It made me uncomfortable to be in the news, but at least the facts were accurate. Patricia's lawyer reached out to Marcus, asking if I'd support a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and community service instead of jail time. Marcus asked my opinion. "I don't want her to go to jail," I said. "I just wanted her to stop harassing me. If she accepts responsibility and there are real consequences, that's enough." Patricia pled guilty to filing a false police report. She was sentenced to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, a fine of $2,000, and she had to pay me an additional $5,000 in restitution for the stress and damage to my reputation. She was also permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position in Colorado, which seemed fitting. The story could have ended there, but there was one more twist. In April, I got a letter from a law firm representing the original developers of Meadowbrook Hills. They'd heard about the dispute and wanted to clarify something. The development agreement that Patricia had used to justify her claims had been superseded by an amendment in 2003. The amendment specifically stated that any planned infrastructure not completed by 2002 was considered abandoned and no longer subject to the original agreement's provisions. In other words, even the legal basis Patricia thought she had was invalid. She'd never even checked if the original agreement was still in effect. Marcus sent the letter to the DA's office and to the HOA. It was the final nail in the coffin of Patricia's credibility. By May, life had returned to normal. My gate remained locked, exactly as it should be. I worked from home in peace. Neighbors were friendly again. The new HOA board was reasonable and professional. I ran into Harold and Alina Pritchard at the grocery store in early June. Alina looked healthy and vibrant. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Much better," she said. "And still grateful for what you did. We heard about everything that happened with Patricia. What a nightmare for you." "It worked out," I said, "and I'm glad you're doing well." That evening I sat on my deck, looking down at my driveway and the gate at the bottom. It was such a simple thing, a gate on private property. But it had become the center of months of conflict, thousands of dollars in legal fees, a criminal investigation, and a complete upheaval of HOA leadership. All because Patricia Henderson decided she knew better than reality itself. The experience taught me several things. First, HOAs can be incredibly powerful and sometimes dangerous when led by the wrong people. Second, standing up for your rights is expensive and exhausting, but sometimes necessary. Third, documentation is everything. Without my detailed records and Marcus's thorough legal work, things could have gone very differently. But most importantly, I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. I could have given in, removed the gate, avoided the conflict. It would have been easier, but it also would have been wrong. The gate was mine, on my property, serving a legitimate purpose. Patricia had no right to take that away, no matter what power she thought the HOA gave her. As I finished my beer and watched the sun set over the mountains, I felt genuinely at peace for the first time in months. The gate stood at the bottom of my driveway, solid and secure, exactly where it belonged. And tomorrow, and every day after, it would still be there. Because some battles, no matter how absurd they seem, are worth fighting. Not out of stubbornness, but out of principle. My home was my castle, and my gate was staying exactly where it was. The whole ordeal also had an unexpected positive effect on the neighborhood. The new HOA board, led by Robert Chen, was much more transparent and reasonable. They started holding open meetings where residents could voice concerns. They published clear guidelines for what was and wasn't enforceable. They even created an appeal process for disputed violations, with neutral third-party arbitration. Several neighbors told me that my fight had opened their eyes to problems in how the HOA had been operating. Patricia hadn't just targeted me. She'd been heavy-handed with other residents too. My case became the catalyst for real reform. In July, the HOA formally updated all their governing documents, explicitly removing the outdated references to never-built infrastructure. They also added protections against frivolous fines and harassment. Robert even asked me to review the new policies before they were voted on. "Your experience showed us what can go wrong," he said. "We want to make sure it never happens again to anyone." I appreciated the gesture and the changes. It felt like something good had come from all the stress and conflict. Patricia, for her part, moved out of the neighborhood in August. I heard she'd sold her house and relocated to Denver. I never saw her again, which was perfectly fine with me. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but I honestly didn't care either way. She was out of my life, and that was what mattered. By September, exactly 1 year after the whole mess started, I was sitting in my living room working on a new software project when my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey Carson," he said, "I wanted to give you an update. Remember how I said Patricia's case might have broader implications?" "Yeah," I said. "Well, the Colorado HOA Advocacy Coalition has been using your case as an example in pushing for state-level HOA reform," he said. "There's a bill being proposed that would limit HOA powers in several key ways, including requiring court orders before placing liens on properties and creating state oversight for HOA disputes." "Because of my case?" I asked, surprised. "Your case is one of several they're citing," Marcus said. "But yours is particularly egregious because it shows how HOAs can abuse technical violations and outdated documents to harass homeowners. The judge's ruling in your favor set a precedent that's being used to argue for broader reforms." "That's amazing," I said. "You did good, Carson," Marcus said. "You stood your ground when most people would have given in. That takes guts." After we hung up, I thought about his words. I hadn't fought Patricia and the HOA to be some kind of champion for homeowners' rights. I just wanted to keep my gate locked. But sometimes standing up for yourself has ripple effects you never anticipated. The Colorado HOA Reform Act passed in November, with provisions that would protect future homeowners from the kind of abuse I'd experienced. It wasn't a perfect law, but it was a start. And knowing that my struggle had contributed to something positive made all the stress worthwhile. As winter approached again, I made sure to keep my plow attachment ready. Not because anyone required it, but because helping Alina Pritchard had reminded me that being a good neighbor isn't about following arbitrary rules. It's about being there when people actually need you. The gate at the bottom of my driveway stood solid and secure, and my life had returned to peaceful normalcy. I'd survived an HOA gone rogue, a blizzard, a false police report, and months of harassment. And I'd come out the other side with my principles intact and my gate still locked. Some people might think that's a lot of trouble over something as simple as a gate. But it was never really about the gate. It was about the right to control your own property, to have privacy in your own home, to not be bullied by petty tyrants wielding HOA bylaws like weapons. I won because I refused to back down, because I documented everything, and because I had a good lawyer. But mostly, I won because I was right. My driveway was my driveway, my gate was my gate, and no amount of HOA nonsense could change that basic fact. And when the first snow of the new winter fell in December, I sat in my warm house, looked out at my private driveway with its locked gate at the bottom, and smiled. I'd earned this peace, this privacy, this simple right to keep my own property secure. The gate would stay locked, the driveway would stay private, and life would go on exactly as it should. Patricia Henderson had learned that you can't bully someone into submission when they're willing to fight back with facts and the law on their side. And I'd learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones that seem smallest from the outside. My gate, my rules. That's how it started, and that's how it ended. Exactly as it should be.